Welcome to the Fitfile podcast, where you're going to hear about anything and everything sports tech related, whether that's sports watches, bike computers, bike trainers, trainer apps, and anything that you can use to level up your health, fitness, and sports game.
We've got Des of DesFit and myself, Ray of DCRainmaker.com, as well as DC Rainmaker on YouTube. And in this episode, I mentioned those introductions because it's going to be a little bit different today, because we're going to be basically talking about ourselves and, more importantly, what we do.
Yeah, so this is definitely a very unique job that both of us do, and we're very fortunate to be in this position, but there's definitely a lot that goes on behind the scenes in terms of like what it actually takes to put out a review, how we actually engage with companies, how we make money, and some of the more darker like recesses, I guess you could say, of this job too, because it's definitely not all like unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah, we're going to talk about things like getting blacklisted by companies and all the quirks of embargoes and NDAs. We're gonna just throw it all out there. And basically what we're going to do is this is arguably the most prepared we have ever been for an episode by far.
Or anything.
Anything in life, actually. And we have a massive list of like notes and stuff like that. So we're going to refer to our notes a lot because we're taking all the questions that you've asked, not just in a podcast over the last little while, but really like the most common questions over the last like decade or so, decade and a half that we've been doing this. And so we're going to dive into everything we can think about in one theoretically cohesively woven storyline from kind of beginning to end.
Yeah. So I guess we should probably start out with how we actually started doing this sort of job. So like how did you actually get started doing sports tech reviews?
So yeah, mine was a bit of like an accident of sorts in that I had started a blog to chronicle the journey of my first Ironman. So I basically started it on the day I signed up for Ironman Canada back in 2007 or something like that. And then I was going to theoretically finish this whole idea a year later on race day. That's back in the days when you had to do it on site. But as I was posting my like daily training sort of stuff, I was also working at the time for Microsoft, and there was this internal triathlon group that basically kind of communicated back and forth on all things triathlon, as well as I had a group of friends at work that we just would share like these product reviews. And it could be anything from like a movie that you saw to like a thing that you bought. It was just like, what stupid thing did you buy as a tech geek? And what do you think about it? And usually it was just like a few paragraphs long. And it kind of went from there. Well, I basically had both an original Polar watch as well as a Garmin Forerunner 305. And I had written up these like stupid little reviews for the internal triathlon group at Microsoft. And one day I decided to take that email that I wrote and literally copied and pasted it into the site for DCRainmaker.com, and that became my first blog, first product review of that product. And then from there, each new stupid thing that I bought, I would go ahead and write up a review for it, and it got longer and longer over time.
Huh, that's super interesting. Yeah, so mine was kind of an accident as well. So I actually started a YouTube channel to share my experience with intermittent fasting. So I've been doing that for about 10 plus years. And I just kind of wanted to share like how I actually did it, how I actually feel after, 16 hours of not eating and stuff like that. And then after a while, I started to get into more sports technology as well. So I had like a Forerunner 910 XT, I had a Vivo Active HR, and then I eventually got a Phoenix 3 HR as well. And so at the time,
that's like the legends right there. That's like starting off like,
yeah,
those are on pedestals for the products.
those aren't the OGs, but I think that was certainly the point where sports wearables started to come of age, I think would be maybe a good way of putting it.
It was a solid inflection point. Like the original Vivo Active was Garmin's claim to fame at the time of being the thinnest GPS watch ever, right? So like that was that moment of like, it's going to hit the masses.
Yeah, exactly. So at the time, the only resource for information like that is the guy on the other end of the camera over there, right there.
He said, that stuff's horrible. I got to do better than that.
but realistically, so there were kind of like two different styles of information at that time. There were the super in-depth review, I'll say singular because you're really the only person doing it at that time. And then there were a lot of other publications who would go into, more of a 10,000 foot view of that product. And well, I read your reviews. I think you were doing some YouTube at that time, but you weren't as heavy into it as you are now. for sure.
Yeah, it was my used YouTube as a simple place to hold videos to show things, right? So like
Yes.
all of my original YouTube videos, my very first YouTube videos are just me showing the menus. I don't think I even have narration on some of them. I think my very first
Exactly.
one is like the Edge 705 going around some neighborhoods I lived in DC at the time. And there's no narration. It is shaky as hell. But also that was YouTube in 2010ish or so, right?
Yeah,
Like it
exactly.
wasn't the productions you see today. It was just people pointing the camera at something and uploaded it. And I did
Yeah.
exactly that.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. So at that time, I kind of noticed that there wasn't really much for in-depth content on YouTube, at least for these types of sports wearables. So you were out there. So I kind of thought, well, you know what? Been doing a few videos. I did some like bike gear review videos and stuff like that. So I started to do some watches and some other sports technology. And then, wow, we're here today, like 7, 8 years later. So yeah, that's kind of what happened with me. So when did you actually start like getting really heavily invested in YouTube?
It was also sort of by accident. So it was one of the first Garmin watches, one of the Phoenix watches. I think like the Phoenix 2 or 3-ish time frame. And it was back in the days they would announce it at CES, and I would be at CES and have like a couple hours, if not the day before, to play with the watch. But didn't really have like what we do now. I won't get into later on of months of time with these watches ahead of time.
Was this the one that you were in with the tuxedo? You had one video with a tuxedo.
Oh yeah, that came later on with the predecessor to the Mark series. I think it was like the Chrono series or something like that.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that was
All right.
that's when I started really up in the game, and I had like music and styles. But no,
Okay.
this was actually funny. So this was at CES, and basically I made a video, and this is like the first one that really took off for me, where it was just a hands-on user interface video, and this was like really unheard of at the time, where I simply sat there. I remember this so clearly on the back steps of the convention center, outside the doors. Like you have the convention center inside, you walk outside the door where all like the containers are piled up. Basically the garbage bin is where I filmed this thing. And I sat there for, I don't know how long this was, 20, 30 minutes, and just walked through narrating one shot, one take the entire thing, a video showing the menus. Because again, back in those days, no one saw the details of these watches until they got them in their hands later on. Like there wasn't, the marketing was all just marketing fluff, like a couple photos, certainly no YouTube videos from Garmin back in that day. And I figured I just would publish this thing, and that people like that. And that would actually eventually become, later on down the road when we get to it, my beginner guides. Like I would have user interface guides, which eventually morphed into beginner guides and things of that nature. But that was like the first time that that I had this moment of, oh, there's an audience here. And from there, then I started getting into, actually like produced things and kind of iterated out from there. And I think that actually gets into a bit of an interesting topic, which is how we decide where we put content and how companies engage us and what type of things that we produce at the end of the day. I think it starts off, at least for me anyways, at the very beginning conversation of how early before a product announcement are we? So are we talking, 1 month, 3 months out, even longer? Or are we talking like 24 hours? And that's where what the content we create from that, in other words, what the type of review is going to be a first look or hands-on, which isn't a review. It's just, hey, here's this thing. It's akin to a trade show, right? I walk into a trade show, I look at something, that is the quote, first look at me seeing that thing for the very first time. Versus the review implies that I've used it, I've tested it, I've decided, I've formulated in my head and said, yep, this thing is awesome, or this thing sucks, and here's all the reasons why, and backed by some sort of evidence.
Yeah, and I think that really comes down to almost the titles, I guess you could say, of the content that we're going to have out at the time of a product launch. Again, how much lead up time do we have with the product? So the style of that reviews that we want to do, we want to go into as much depth as humanly possible with these devices to, not only talk about like the features from the marketing sheet and how they work, but if they actually work and how those will kind of fan out over the long term. So I think that there's been kind of a mix of timelines that we get from different companies. So like Ray was saying, we may get a product a couple weeks, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I think that's a comfortable amount of time for us to produce the type of in-depth reviews that we want to produce. But then other times it could be a week. Sometimes we get less than 24 hours notice. That can sometimes be a software thing. We'll maybe loop back into that.
We'll talk about that in this week later on.
Yeah, we'll talk. Well, yeah, we'll loop back into that sort of thing soon. But so yeah, that's really where, for our final like in-depth reviews, they literally take weeks of work to do. And it's hard to express really like how much work that we do put into these. It's, it's not only the actual like testing of workouts, the workouts, we're going to go do those workouts already, as athletes, that's kind of part of our training anyways. But then there's like the gathering of data, there's the research into all the features, making sure that we understand all those features really, really well. There's the actual post or script writing, then there's the filming. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. And this also probably is a good time to talk about how we make money, because we don't take money from these companies to test and review these products. So we make our money off of stuff like YouTube advertising. So those are those little ads that play before and during a video. We also have affiliate links for some of the products that we talk about. And then on occasion, we also have some sponsors for companies that fall outside of the realm of the gadgets that we talk about. So these are going to be stuff like coffee companies. I've talked about a cooling mattress before, and then Ray's also done some like bike racks and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most common questions, at least I get, when people say, okay, you don't take money from the companies, you don't take ads. Like for my case, I don't do any advertising for any of the companies that I review on the website or anything in that same segment. So in other words, Garmin and Apple and GoPro and fill in the blank, any company that I review, Wahoo, etc., they're not allowed to advertise on dcrainmaker.com. Nor are any of the companies in the like sports tech segment. Instead, the ads, like at least for ads right now for me, is mostly if you're searching for toilet paper, you're going to get toilet paper ads. If you're searching for Caribbean vacations, you're going to get Caribbean vacation ads, and so on down the list. There are some other like things where I have worked out an ad partner, but it's like an adjacent category of something in nutrition, for example, that we'll talk about in just a second. Also on the website side, I've got the DCR analyzer that people can analyze data sets. So that's a subscription service, as well as being a DCR supporter. And I mention these not like as an advertisement for these things, but just to clarify those revenue sources, because people ask all the time, constantly, especially companies ask this a lot. Speaking of companies, I don't do any engineering consulting with companies in the space. So a lot of times companies will be like, hey, can we pay for your time to give your thoughts on this thing? And no, for me, I'm happy to give those thoughts to virtually every company, small and large. And I do equally across both of those to a reasonable extent anyways. Like if you're asking for, like twice a week conference calls for an hour, that's not going to happen. But I can have a chat on how things are going and kind of both long-term plans and short-term plans. Finally, we get to the YouTube side of things, which is relatively straightforward in the grand scheme of things. YouTube pays us based on clicks, watching the video to be precise, and watching the ad within the video to be even more precise, as well as actual paid ad sponsor reads in those videos. So this would be a case of, a given company has a product, and I do a 45 to 60 second sponsor read, if you will, in that particular video. But again, the same rules apply. I'm not going to do anything in the space that I cover.
So yeah, you may see like an ad for like maybe like coffee or something like that. We're definitely still waiting for our Haribo sponsorship. We'll definitely take gummy bears any day of the week, to plug those, because those are the nutrition that we need when we go do our adventures and whatnot.
Yeah.
But looping that back to the YouTube side of things, in terms of the amount of views that it takes to earn a meaningful salary on YouTube, it takes a lot. If you see a channel that's making or that's doing, let's say, 1 million views a month, that person could probably live off that salary, maybe. But it really depends on, there's basically like there's a term called CPM, which is basically how much you're actually paid per view. And that can vary drastically on a video. I mean, it really depends on different types of products and stuff like that. So yeah, in terms of like, we're definitely not rolling in the dough here.
No, it depends. And there's a lot of like loss leaders as well, right? So in the sense that there are certain videos that will do poorly, but you do them because it's what you need to do in terms of the covering all those different topic areas or those particular product categories, etc. But there's huge swings in that. So 1 million views in January is worth bumpkus. Like it's worth almost nothing. 1 million views in November, boom, that's where you want to be, because advertisers pay drastically different amounts. Basically, it drops off a cliff on January 1st, and then it slowly ramps up over basically the rest of the year until it hits its peak just before Christmas.
Yep. So that's where, YouTube is a good source of our income for sure, but we certainly, have to look at other sources as well. So I think that may be a good time to bring up today's sponsor.
Yeah, indeed. So the sponsor of the podcast, in terms of what keeps us the lights on at 9:13 p.m. at night as we film this, is Precision Fuel and Hydration. So they've been a sponsor of the podcast now for a few episodes, but more importantly, it's been what I've been using for a few years for my training and racing from a fueling standpoint. It's also what my wife uses, as well as a bunch of Tour de France teams and pro triathletes, you name it, they're all on it. One of the biggest things that I appreciate about this, though, is that they've actually got an entire team of sports scientists behind the scenes that'll go ahead and figure out your race plan. They'll look at your race plan. They'll say, hey, here's the products that you want to use. In fact, I've got this done for next week when I go on this crazy, stupid hike thing for, 3 or 4 days, where it's not something I normally fuel for. I fuel for triathlons, and I know what that looks like from a triathlon standpoint in terms of the zones I'm in, the intensities, but fueling for a hike where you're going to go and do a climb up, for 2 hours straight up at really high intensity, and then you're going to drop off and go down for a couple hours of descending again and repeat over and over again for 12 hours a day. That's a whole different ballgame. So I appreciate the ability to have these folks that you can call the athlete support crew and have a chat to figure out that kind of race plan, and they can then from there take it on and help you kind of advise what products that you should take from them. All of their products are Informed Sports certified. They're vegan, all are 2-to-1 glucose fructose, and contain no artificial ingredients. And most importantly, these things are all edible in the fact that I can consume them and don't want to throw up, which is like my bar for success on eating stuff. They taste reasonably good. In any case, you can visit the link in the description for the free fuel and hydration planner, which is the website that you can plan all this stuff without talking to someone, or you can get 15% off your first order with the coupon code FITFILE. Again, thanks to Precision for sponsoring today's episode.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Okay. So looping back to the actual style of reviews that we do. So in terms of the products that we choose to review. So first of all, we get a lot, and I mean a lot of solicitation, I guess you could say, for different types of products out there. And even in terms of the more major brands, I guess you could say, it's like we don't have enough risks to cover everything that we want to cover, and enough time, quite frankly. So we definitely have to kind of pick and choose a particular type of product that I think is going to, that we're personally interested in, as well as we know it's going to have a good return on investment, I guess you could say, too, in terms of the audience actually wanting to know about it. So how do you decide on what product that you want to review?
I think to begin with, I have two basic gates, if you will, into the review corral. Number one is it something that a lot of people are asking about? And number two is it something that I am interested in personally in some way, shape, or form, right? If it doesn't hit at least one of those criteria, then it's probably not going to make it onto the list. So I think that's where you talk about all the companies that email on a daily basis. We're talking a lot of emails on a daily basis coming in on stuff. And some of it is just garbage spam from companies that you've never heard of that are not even in this realm, like trying to get a vacuum cleaner or something like that. But there's also a lot of other companies that are sports tech, either apps or products, etc. And I'm looking at those products and I'm deciding if it's not something that's a big ticket item where obviously a ton of people are asking for it. It's like, oh, hey, there's a lot of people asking for this. Let's do a review, but it's smaller, maybe unheard of. I'm going to look at that and try to make a decision on whether or not this is interesting and new and different enough to cover in a review, or viable to cover in a review. I think a good example of this that's kind of the tricky ground is something like the classified drivetrain system, where it's something that there is interest in there. I'm not sure how much in the grand scheme of things. There's interest in that. Oh, it's cool, but I don't know if I actually want to buy it. But the other side of that, though, is that it's a brand new company. It's small, and that would theoretically be a good area where I might cover. But I want to be able to validate whatever it is that I'm covering. So I don't want it to be a PR fluff piece. I want to be able to look at something and go, this is good or bad, and here's why. And that's a case where I've looked at that repeatedly. I've looked at all the data they've sent me. They've contacted me many, many, many times. But I don't know how I can validate some of their claims in a very scientific-ish sort of way, in a way to be able to say, yes, this is true, or no, it's not true. And there's some people that have tried, and it's a very complex kind of endeavor. And that's where I look at it and go, this is really, really complicated to validate. And it would take me an immense amount of time. And with that same amount of time, I can get through 5 or 6 or 7 other products over the course of a number of weeks that it would take me to kind of focus on this one thing.
Yeah, so there's definitely bread and butter devices and software that we know how to review really quickly. So we have that template set up, it's those are going to be smartwatches, sports watches, power meters, bike trainers, all those sort of things where we know how to get from here to the end very easily. But then there's devices that we don't necessarily, there's going to be stuff that's going to be harder to validate, like Ray was kind of talking about there. But there's also a step in this too, where we sometimes get these devices at a point where they're maybe not perfectly ready for actual release. So, we're waiting on certain things like, the final software to come out and stuff like that too.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a case where we talked, Des mentioned earlier on what's sort of the ideal time. And I think in some cases it's 2 to 3 weeks, but it does depend on the product category, right? So in a way, 2 to 3 weeks is actually great for a power meter. It's relatively straightforward. There's not a lot to shoot in the grand scheme of things. You're going to go out, you're going to do a whole bunch of rides indoors and outdoors across different trains, etc. Longer is always better for a power meter, but that's like a relatively clean cut kind of thing. More complex products would be something like a really high-end multi-sport watch, like a Garmin Fenix series watch, or in my case, action cameras are actually a really complex thing to review because there's just so much data and footage and things to capture that having a month or 2 months is really much better for us and helps us get to kind of to stick that landing later on. We'll talk about sticking the landing and our ability or inability to stick that landing, exactly. Because that's like we always have a landing point that we're trying to get to, and how we get there, just like in this podcast episode, varies quite a bit. So one of the things though that's important to understand about this is that when we get devices, most of the time they are on late beta to near final production, hardware and software. It is generally fairly rare for us to get non-final production hardware. So we almost always get production hardware, but get like what's called release candidate builds of the software. And so in most cases, by the time we get stuff, it is generally a fairly stable type of product. And my goal, and I think yours as well, is that, if we're releasing a review on a product, we want it to be basically the production hardware and the production software. We don't want a case where we want it to be also available for people. I don't want to release a review today and have the product not available for another month or 2 months or something, because that time there means that something's changing. Something's changing in software or hardware that could make it better or could make it worse. And one of the things that people often ask us about is whether or not our products have extra like kid gloves on them. Are they double extra QC validated or all these things, right? And honestly,
almost the opposite.
It's the opposite. I promise you, the products that we get are the worst products, the worst iterations of this product that we will see going forward. What you get is almost always going to be better than what we get, because we're on this journey, but also, we land at production where that's theoretically the production version of the software going out and people can buy it the next day, all that kind of stuff. But oftentimes there's still a lot of quirks there. So when we're giving reviews, I'm assuming those quirks are not being fixed. I have to review it as it is today. But if you buy this product a month later, it's often quite a bit better than what it was on a release day.
With the position that we're in, getting these products so early with software that's not necessarily final yet too, there's also a feedback process that we have with the companies that we work with, because we're definitely reviewing these products, but it's our job to report back to the companies like, all right, well, I saw this or I saw that, and we really want these products to be better for everyone. So it's like we want these products to be better for all of you guys out there. We want these products to be better for us, so we don't have to be as frustrated with them, and we want the products to be better for the company too. So, there's definitely a conversation that definitely happens in terms of the type of testing that we do and the feedback that we give to the company as well.
Yep, and it's definitely a big chunk of time. I think that's something that people might not understand, is that feedback loop, depending on the product and the complexity and things that are going wrong, can be a lot of time invested to figure out what's going wrong, right? So I think we had the case we talked about Look and the Look pedals back a few weeks ago and having problems, and the company eventually flown in, and many companies have flown in, at least here to the cave over the last decade or whatever, either here or in Paris, to look at those things. But even just the collecting, if you go out for a run and collecting all that data and finding out something's broken, and then grabbing the debug stuff off all those watches, right? Like it's a process that every run somehow takes 20 to 30 minutes after the run to get all that data collected and bring it back and go back to the company and be like, this thing broke, here's why. It's all this extra time that people, I don't think, even know exists, but it does go on behind the scenes, because as Ed said, we want these products to improve. And my goal, I guess I would say, from the very beginning has always been to explain why a product is weird or broken or does something dumb. And I've always said I will go back to the company and I will ask them, why is this thing suck in this way, right? And I'm going to give them their opportunity to explain why it sucks in that way, because sometimes, a lot of times in fact, they have really good reasons for that, really good engineering reasons, not usually marketing reasons or engineering reasons. And I find that most people are much more understanding of those decisions that are made if they can understand the real reason behind the scenes. And I mean, again, sometimes that real reason is product differentiation. They want to upsell you somewhere else. But a lot of times it's like, oh, this chipset doesn't support this, and we can't do this because of that, and so on. So it's always been my goal to explain the bad choices and then explain maybe why that's not the right choice, right? I'm not gonna. They don't get like a free platform to make their PR case, but they can at least say, hey, here's why, and then I can explain why that's viable or not.
Yeah. So this kind of brings up kind of leading up to the release when we start to find certain things that could be wrong with these devices. So there have been cases where, based on the things that we find, and I think this is probably more on your end of things because I don't know,
so
you just kind of yeah, exactly. so there certainly can be things that pop up in our testing that sometimes the company just doesn't run across this particular scenario. Who knows? And we provide some feedback on something that may not be right, and then that eventually delays a product. And what's interesting about that sort of scenario, though, is that you have to understand it's like we're putting in a lot of time, right, leading up to that product launch to make sure that we're testing everything that needs to be done. And quite frankly, if that product gets delayed, we have used that time that could have been used for another product or another review. So yeah, there are certain delays that happen from time to time as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's not just a delay of the product, but also even a delay of the announcement, right? So there's cases where, Des and I will have a schedule and it's like, okay, this thing goes live on Tuesday, this thing goes live on Thursday. We're going to spend all of our time leading up to that on both days. And then something slips. And now you're sitting there, like, from my standpoint, I'm like, well, I've got nothing to boast now, right? That's just, I've invested all my time towards hitting these sort of things, and that happens. And so, like, when you see dcrainmaker.com, the website, more than anything else, like, empty for a week, that's usually telling you something slipped behind the scenes, right? Some product that was slated to go there. Otherwise, I would have had filler posts, if you will, or something else in there. But I've invested all my time into that, plan for that thing to happen.
That kind of leads into some other products or reviews that I guess you could say never even see the light of day because the product really just never did what it was supposed to do. So, the Nix sweat this Nix sweat sensor, that's something that we have both spent an enormous amount of time testing, including your wife, and it really has never produced the type of results that we expected out of it, and we never had a review on it. And I guess that's the Super Sapiens thing for you too, right? Like that would be another
same
one?
Sort of thing. I think it's a little bit different in the sense that Super Sapiens didn't work for me as a human, meaning that they said I was the outlier of things. And it was just one of those, like, every time I injected myself with it, it was, just wasn't working out for me. Nix was a little bit different. That didn't work for the three of us, you, myself, my wife. And then by the time we got to the point of, like, really interrogating them and being like, this is just not working. Here's all of our data. And we're talking an inordinate amount of data. My head hurts as to how much data we had collected between the three of us. And this is not an easy product from a data collection standpoint, because it's not like a run where you went off and you had 3 or 4 watches with you and you came back and you're like, done. This was, you had to do a naked weigh-in beforehand. You had to track every single little bit of nutrition and hydration you took during that run. You had to ensure that you didn't go pee or poop anywhere, because that would throw off all the numbers in terms of the data tracking. And then at the end of the thing, you had to go ahead and do the naked weigh-in again. And so, like, this was a lot of time spent, and we presented all this evidence back, and they're like, yeah, you're just not doing it right, sort of thing. And it's you, it's not us, like, whatever. And then, like, a few weeks later, they're like, we're changing our algorithms across the board. And that vastly changed the product, where I was about to pretty much go live with my product review and be like, this just sucks, right? It just does not work, period. And then they're like, we've changed our algorithms to account for the stuff that essentially we were pointing out it didn't account for. And then by the time that hit, we didn't have a very hot summer here in the Netherlands last year. So my ability to actually test this product, which involved heat and sweat, wasn't there. That said, just for clarity, I have started this stupid journey again. I've got a box of 30 of them sitting over there that I bought, by the way. So I bought a whole nother set of these, a box of 10 and a box of 20. And I'm going to be working over the next month to retest this. I will say that the initial results I'm getting are more positive, but put that with a boulder-sized grain of salt until I can get through all of my test stuff, because I've had also some somewhat viable ones in the past too. So point is, I don't want to like completely crap on them right now, but that's, you know, an example of we spend a lot of time on something and it just doesn't come to fruition. Another example can be just a product that the can gets kicked down the road, right? Like I think about the Four Eyes Precision Dual system that finally went live back, 3 or 4 weeks ago, something like that. That was something that you, Shane, and I started testing over a year ago, right?
Yep.
And I've got like a pile of cranksets from them sitting over there that they just kept on sending new beta ones out. They're like, try this one, try this one, try this one. And they eventually stuck the landing, right? But it's tough to balance that sometimes when products just aren't quite ready yet.
So yeah, that's where with the Four Eyes power meter, that's something that I eventually kind of had to give up on my end of things, just because I was spending a lot of time on that product where I could have been devoting that time to something else. But, you know, at the same time, there will be some bad reviews that eventually go out.
Yeah, I think especially for larger companies. Like I think I've got a little more tolerance for waiting for the smaller company to get their stuff together.
Sure, yeah.
You know, because I am very cognizant, incredibly cognizant that what I say can make or break a company. Like this has been, you know, there are many companies that have been quoted about this, about me in particular, saying this is make or break for the company and that can put them out of business. So I'm super cognizant of that. I think for larger companies though, like if they've got a date and the product starts shipping to consumers, once that product is out and it's available to consumers, it's fair game, and I will call it like it is, whether it's good or bad. And every company that I reviewed has had products that have been reviewed well and products that have been complete dumpster fires, right? Whether you're Garmin or GoPro or DJI or Apple, etc., you can find those reviews for me that I point out how bad they were. And we'll talk, I think, later on about what happens after those bad reviews sometimes, because it can vary quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is though, like looping back though, like in terms of the products that we like to cover here, they really are products that we are personally interested in. There could be some products out there that, you know, maybe on the outskirts of what we would personally use. You know, for instance, let's say the HRM Fit, you know, heart rate monitor from Garmin. You know, it's something that we, both of us personally, can't used, but you know, that's definitely in that sports tech space that it's interesting enough that we do want to talk about it to the extent that we can talk about it. So the majority of the stuff we talk about is stuff we would want to use on a daily basis. But yeah, unfortunately, some things out there just, wow, it's like, yeah, it's going to be a bad review, unfortunately. But maybe let's flip that around. Let's flip that frown upside down and talk about like, let's talk about the good review process. Let's talk about like, you know, products that actually work and what it actually looks like in terms of our testing, the data collection, the filming, all that kind of process.
Yeah. So I think it actually starts a little before that at the embargo side of it, right? So what an embargo is, maybe we'll explain that very briefly. And that an embargo is something that essentially keeps us from telling you about what the product is, right? So there's 2 products sitting right there that I can't tell you about yet. They're coming soon, very soon, in fact, but I can't talk about them. And in most cases, there is not actually a written NDA or non-disclosure agreement between reviewers and companies. That's generally frowned about and frowned upon in the kind of like journalism world. Instead, there's essentially a gentleman's handshake, and that if you go ahead and talk about this product in any way, shape, or form, Instagram posts, etc., beforehand, then you'll pretty much get banned in the future for having early access to products. And the point of embargoes is to allow people like us to put together a cohesive review without like that marketing PR explosion that happens when a company's announced. So that way, if you're looking for a information about this new product on the moment it's announced, at the moment it's announced, you can see someone that's actually used it as opposed to just a bunch of the company's, press release type materials. But embargoes actually come from well before sports technology products. They come from like the 1930s, where medical journals would go ahead and give access to those studies ahead of time to media outlets, newspapers, things like that, to go ahead and evaluate that so that once those things were announced, they could be, again, written about appropriately. Now, that background, there are essentially like 3.5 to 4 types of embargoes out there. So I want to kind of run through these because it's really interesting how different they are, and they'll drive what we do, what we create on that day things are announced. And embargoes, by the way, typically are tied to a given date and time. So they'll be like, this is, embargoed until April 2nd at 9 a.m. Eastern, U.S. Eastern time. So the first embargo type is the everything unlimited on a given date and time, meaning you can do whatever the heck you want. You can talk about whatever you want, show whatever you want, call it whatever you want on that April 2nd date. Without any restrictions whatsoever. That's our favorite type of embargo because it allows us to create those in-depth reviews. It allows us to do all that deep analysis and diving of the product. And it's typically for products that we've had for a longer period of time.
What's interesting about that is that I've noticed a little trend lately that it seems like that's getting to be more of a rarer occurrence.
Yeah, so that then gets the second type of embargo, which is the preview type hands-on embargo. And so that's where a company will announce something, usually tied to an event, where they have an event where people are at the event and say, you can go ahead and have a first look at it. They're going to announce it on stage or whatever the case is, and then you can basically do a hands-on first impression, something, but you can't call it a review because then they'll give you the product at that point and you'll have 1 to 2 weeks or some other time period to go ahead and do your review. And then there's a review embargo date, which is down the road, again, that 1 or 2 weeks time frame. The theory behind this, it's somewhat mixed. The theory behind this is that a company may have something that is very, very hard to keep a secret on when you have lots of reviewers out there and media outlets and stuff like that. So this allows them to keep that secret really close and then give those people access to that product at announcement, time 0, but also ensure that the reviews that happen 2 weeks later, because usually the product isn't available until the reviews come out, are, it's an authentic kind of review process. It's not just, I touch the product once and I call in a review. So probably the most common examples of the industry of this would be Apple and Samsung and a few others in that realm, versus Garmin tends to go for the everything all at once sort of thing. Again, different product categories. As you mentioned, though, we are seeing that slide slightly towards the split embargo. I would caution, though, to companies that may be getting ideas there, that you can really only pull off that split embargo when you're like Apple and Samsung, and Google as well in that same category. Otherwise, there's just simply not enough interest in your product.
You'll see definitely different trends with this sort of strategy, I guess you could say, with different industries and whatnot. But definitely, like Ray was saying, you have to be the most well-known companies out there to be able to pull this off. And the reason for this is that people have to really want that product. That product really has to be in demand, or people are going to forget about it. Like if you have like a 3-week window of when the product was launched to the actual review, people may forget about it in that time and move on to something else. Or, maybe another company will put their competing product on sale or something along those lines as well.
Yep. Yeah, we saw this, and I think a good example of this playing out but falling flat was actually last year with GoPro. So last year, GoPro tried to do a split embargo of the Hero 12, and I would say it backfired pretty heavily for them. And I think they've even kind of realized that at this point as well, where they tried to have people have you had the product. So I had the product for like a month ahead of time, but the first embargo was, do not call it review. That's common. Like the companies will say, do not call this a review. Fitbit's done this for many, many years as well. And then the second embargo was, I think, like 5 days later. And it was called the review embargo, right? And you can do a review. for people like me and Des and others where we want to have in-depth reviews, that first embargo posed a real problem because I wanted to show as much as I could, but I couldn't call it a review, right? I was kind of like hamstrung there a bit. So I was very, very clear in my video at the time about this embargo split. And I basically said, I want to be super clear up front. I'm going to talk about new features, but this is not a review because of the restrictions that GoPro has put in place. And I would suspect in the future, we're going to see GoPro probably reconsolidate back into that single sort of thing, at least for stuff that's, basically being available within a couple of days, just because it does cause so many challenges down the road. In fact, that will also get into, again, the funny blacklisting conversation a bit later on as well.
Yeah, going back to the actual strategy, in my mind, if I'm a consumer, I would prefer to be able to just like have it available right when it's actually announced. So I can just go buy it because, I want to have all that content that I can consume on day zero. And, I have that consumer want at that point and I want to just go buy it. So, that's the style that I personally prefer. But then there is also the amount of time with the embargo. So again, that's really going to differ. I think a lot of the companies that we work with, we've had long enough relationships with them that we will get enough notice, but then there's certain things that just like pop up with like less than 24 hours notice, which just happened. Yeah.
Wahoo. I think it's funny. This is a really good example of like, I think both of us have a very good relationship with Wahoo. So that Wahoo announced this past week, GoPro action camera control, music control, and what was the third control? Lighting control, right?
Yeah.
And that was something that all of us knew was coming. We had talked to engineering about it for months. Like, in fact, I actually made the original introduction between GoPro and Wahoo. I have the email. Maybe I'll take a screenshot here about this whole thing, right, to get this going. And we got notice like 24 hours ahead of time. And this is one of the challenges that happens when we are so close to the company in terms of understanding what's coming down the pipeline, is that sometimes the engineers have assumed that we know that thing's being announced, but the third-party PR firm doesn't, right? And so the engineers assumes that, oh yeah, Des, Ray, and Shane know this is coming on this date. Of course, no problem. They've already got access to it. Everything's good to go. And then we get a notice like 24 hours out from the third-party PR company being like, hey, this goes live tomorrow. And it's like, oh, shoot, that was not on my bingo card for what I was doing this week, right? Mm-hmm. Or I might not even be in the right like place to do that. I was lucky that I was here this week.
Yeah.
Versus if that was next week and I was on the top of a mountain, I'd be like, and I'm not like singling out Wahoo to make fun of them. I'm just giving a real world example where one of the disadvantages of being so close to those engineering teams is that sometimes there's a big company. The other challenge for me is that I tend to fall in the weird gap of I am European based, but have a global audience. And especially dealing with US companies where they're like, does Ray fall under the Europe bucket for PR, or does he fall under the Americas bucket? And in most companies in the US have eventually just pulled me under like the US bucket, and they're like, he's American, It's close enough. So you can get into like weird like PR things. There's another product coming out in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, something like that. And I have fallen under 3 different PR teams. They're all trying to send me product samples, not talking to each other. I've got an Americas PR team, a UK PR team, and a German PR team who are not talking, but all sending me packages. So I'm going to have 3 of these things to test.
Yeah. So when it comes to the notice, with the style of content that we want to do, precision and accuracy is a huge part of the content that we like to put out. So I think just realistically, the more notice, the better. So that way we can ask the questions that we want to ask, and we can, put out the content without being in a huge rush either. So I think that kind of leads into life scheduling a little bit. So life scheduling with these embargoes, that's certainly kind of a tough thing. So again, like we can get generally a couple weeks notice with stuff like this, but sometimes we'll only just get a couple days notice and we kind of have to like drop everything to actually put out content. So yeah, in terms of actual life scheduling, there's definitely certain times of the year where we know we should not be doing anything, or we should not be planning any family vacations, anything like that. So September would be a huge one because in the whole tech space, that's called Techtember, where basically every other day there's going to be something that's coming out. But there's other parts of the year too where we know we may be able to plan a ski trip or something like that.
Yeah, I'd say for us especially, I basically mentally block August 20th through roughly October 17th, 18th, somewhere wherever like the end of that week is in October. The 20th is a safe bet. That is review announcement hell, especially for wearables, but also for action cameras, especially as well as some drones. So and trainers and really, frankly, everything we talk about now to think about it. I think there was this past September. There was something like 13 product releases in a 48-hour period for me between Apple and I think Fitbit was announcing stuff, and GoPro and Garmin and DJI, and it was just like, it was insane. Wahoo had some stuff on there too, Zwift as well. It was just absolute insanity. And that's where you sort of have to pick, not just between sleep and not sleep, because sleep just goes out the window, but also like how you're going to cover each product, whether it's going to be a full in-depth review or first look. And that's where when the companies that get you those products earlier, they get elevated to in-depth review status more likely than a company that showed up at the last second, right? And I start sending out notes in July to companies as a reminder of this time period. And I say, hey, just a reminder, this is crazy time period. Please don't spring a product on me with 1 day notice or 1 week notice or even 2 weeks notice if you're expecting proper reviewing. Because if we look at like that time frame in September, October, there's also a lot of travel there. There's a lot of those events, Apple and Google events and other companies, GoPro, etc., that have events or the launch events and things like that that we may be going to in person. So you're having to balance, being away from our studio. So I can't test a bike trainer on the road, efficiently anyways. And that's something that I have to test here instead.
Yeah. So that kind of brings up as well, what's actually that review process look like for us? So, we will get the product in hopefully a few weeks before the actual launch date. For me, I pretty much will get it out of the box immediately, shoot some immediate B-roll with it, because on more than one occasion, I've accidentally broken a couple of things and I've had to ask for replacements from companies. Thank you very much, by the way, for all of you out there who have sent me replacements. So yeah, that's where, the first thing I do is I get pretty B-roll of it because I have no idea what may happen to it in the couple weeks that I have to, use it. So, then for me, a lot of time, let's say if we're talking about a watch, I'll usually start to just get some baseline heart rate data, get some baseline GPS data, test it for, a good amount of days, start to test out some of the new features and whatnot, and then really start to collect my thoughts on it and, see if anything comes up that I need to ask the company about or, any quirks that may come up or something like that. And then that process takes a couple of weeks to actually kind of go back and forth, collect all the data that I want to collect. So what does your initial process look like, in terms of that?
It's relatively similar. I'm basically going to go ahead and when a product comes in, I'm going to unbox it on the unboxing table right there, take some photos, take some video of it. I don't tend to take much B-roll ahead of time. I just trust the force and also hope that if I break it, there's a second one. Most companies do send me two copies of products these days. That started off actually because I would do unboxing videos, but also it's how I do beginner guides where I'll start with the actual secondary copy of it. So usually I'm lucky in that I have two in case one dies. But also a lot of companies will send me products for my wife to be able to test as well, especially in the watches realm or anything in the triathlon realm where, having her opinion as a sporty female is something that is really interesting to not just my audience, but the companies as well. And so she gets to put these things through their paces as well, for better or worse. And some products, like you mentioned, the HRM Fit earlier on, she is effectively one of the sole testers of that product because she being really the only person that can actually test that particular product, which is just for folks not familiar, that's essentially a sports bra attachment for a heart rate strap. It's a unique kind of attachment system there. So not something that Des and I can individually test. So once I get the product in, unbox it and start using it, put it on my wrist or whatever it may be, on the bike, action camera, etc. I'm gonna pretty much just use it like normal at first, and I'm gonna try to go through those new features generally as quickly as I can, not in terms of like rushing through them, but to understand them as quickly as I can. So if something's going wrong, I can get back to the company sooner rather than later. I don't like to ask the company things at the last second. I like to find out this is my understanding about something is incorrect or whatever the case is, and then kind of iterate. But I'm always collecting data. Everything is always, every run is 3 to 5 watches. It's heart rate straps and sensors. It's coming back. It's taking all that data off these watches and putting it into Dropbox, and then from there into the DCR analyzer if it's a watch or bike computer, power meter, trainer, etc. And then it's a relatively similar process for action cameras and drones, except there's just a lot more stuff to capture from a comparative standpoint and all that footage, and kind of trying to organize it in a way that I can make sense of on days like today when I'm doing that for a drone and trying to organize all that footage from the last 4 months worth of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So assuming everything goes well with the whole testing process and us understanding the features and those features actually working, then comes the actual post writing for you, as well as the video filming, scripting, and editing whole. Oh my gosh, that always seems like a whirlwind for me. Again, like with our best intentions, we plan to stick that landing pad at that, 5 a.m. embargo, lift time. I think that happens for the most part. There can be occasions where that doesn't necessarily happen. But, in terms of my particular process, I generally want to have, I feel comfortable with having my script done with the video. Like I would say a good 4 days in advance of the product launching. I think that's probably enough time for the software to be finalized on the product, and I can have everything ready to go. 3 days out, I'll actually film my talking head portion, and then maybe 1 to 2 days out, that'll be the editing process. Those are the best intentions. That never happens that way.
No, it never.
How is it for you?
What's the movie Everything All at Once or something like that, right?
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
It's basically so. I guess I should caveat that first, in that obviously I write reviews on the site and I have reviews on YouTube. For the most popular products, those I get both those out on day 0, if you will. In other words, there's a written review on something and there's a YouTube video on something. But I guess I should say not all products fall under having both, right? So certain types of products do better on YouTube, action cameras, drones, things like that. Certain products do better on the site, power meters. Power meters do okay on YouTube, but just kind of blah for my particular audience. So I try as best as I can to do both if time allows. But when push comes to shove, like in the middle of September, when I'm having to decide how to do 14 things on both, by the way, on both YouTube and on the site at once, then I make decisions on what can go where and how I have the time there. So as we get to those final couple days, I'm usually starting to write. Well, in theory, I usually write the beginning of the written review weeks out, and I'll put 1 paragraph on paper, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I got this totally started. And then I come back to it 3 days beforehand. I'm like, oh crap, I have done nothing. I've got literally 1 paragraph, an intro paragraph, and that's it. So as a general rule of thumb, I can write most of my reviews. A trainer power meter review is about a 2 to 4 hour process to write that whole thing out. A watch review, like a Phoenix or something longer, is 6 to 8 hours to write the entire thing. Generally, shooting photos for the written review is an hour or so, maybe 2 hours tops, to edit them and clean them up and make them somewhat viable. And on the YouTube side, it's generally speaking, for the longer videos, about 6 to 8 hours all in, from filming A-roll to B-roll to editing and all that whole process. Some videos are very, very quick. This Wahoo thing that I put together this past week was an hour end to end of basically shooting. I shot it right here. I edited it right here. I did it all. I didn't move from this desk other than just, shooting it all in one shot. Very, very quick to do those sort of things, versus this drone that I'm working on this review for here, something I started, 4 months ago. And I've been collecting all this footage for months and months and months. And then today I basically sat down and like, boom, I'm going to shoot my A-roll this morning. That took about 45 minutes, give or take. And then edit it this afternoon on and off. My wife helped actually edit a little bit of that, the rough cutting process. And then I, on Monday, went out into the woods and shot a bunch of like B-roll footage for realistically 6 hours. I was standing in the woods shooting stuff for this and a few other products, but mostly this, which then gets me to the night before. And I don't usually sleep most nights before. I will try to get everything basically set, and I'll usually go to sleep like 5 a.m. and I'll wake up at then like 7 or 8 after 3 or 4 hours to then finish things off by 1. One of the things I think both Des and I do is we tend to give it to the last second to either resolve issues or to understand how the product works. And that just takes us naturally to that last second, right? I'm getting there. And then as I approach, let's say a typical from my time zone, I'm very lucky in my time. Most all the embargoes for me are between like 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. in the afternoon versus Des is way in the morning. So then I usually use that last bit in the morning to go ahead and try to finish that edit. And essentially, I may have like Academy Award aspirations for my video quality at the beginning of that process. By the time I get to like 45 minutes out, I'm just slash and burn. It's like slash cut, slash cut, slash cut. Don't care about this. I'm going to hit this embargo one way or another. Sometimes I hit it. If people, all of us sports tech reviewers joke, I think, that I'm the one that's like sliding into home 15 to 30 minutes late, despite having a product for 2 months.
Yeah, but you're that guy that can bust into the party 1 hour late and be like, I am here. Let's get rolling. I think there's two reasons that I'm late on reviews. I think one is what you were talking about earlier of I want to kind of maybe eke out that last little bit of detail. Like I just really want that really good last understanding of this particular feature before I go film the entire thing. I've gotten a lot better about that now where I can actually film in chunks and a little bit more modular fashion where I can film actually a couple different versions sometimes of a particular.
What?
Yes.
You have not told me this.
Yes. So I will actually film a couple different versions depending on the outcome of maybe that feature that I didn't quite understand, which direction it should be. And
that's fair. I've done that a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's little tricks that you can kind of do to kind of, cheat that a little bit. And then, it's like when you finally get the confirmation of, all right, this is how it's supposed to work. All right, I'll use that chunk, in there. So it's, it's pretty binary.
Especially confirmation stuff is what you're talking about. Not so much our opinion, but you're waiting for the company to come back with an answer. And it's I got to shoot this now to get it edited. And then I'll wait for your confirmation and have it both ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The other reason my videos are late, and I know I can speak on your behalf on this one too, is that so there's a rule of YouTube that Ray and I have, or at least a joke, I guess you could say. It's like, all right, so take how much time you think it will take to produce your YouTube video, double that, and then multiply that by 10. And that's really how long it's going to take to do. Because my best estimations are basically double of what I really think it should take. It takes double that and then probably 3 to 4 times more than that. It's amazing what does come up at those last moments before a review comes out. It's just fascinating, those little things that can just you get thrown a wrench here and there.
I think it's also notable on YouTube is that you can't meaningfully edit anything on YouTube after it's published, right? So
exactly.
On YouTube, we can take out things. So people might understand this, but on YouTube, I cannot add anything to a video after it's published, nor can I change the audio meaningfully. I can snip out pieces. So if something happens and I've made a mistake in a video that's notable enough that I want it snipped out, then I can do that. But there's ramifications to doing that. The audio gets out of sync for up to a day, and there's all sorts of wonk there. But the point is that on the site side, I can go live with a review and not necessarily have all the sections done. So some sections are not important for day zero. For example, an unboxing section. And when I'm talking that slash and burn happens in the hour before I get to review, one of those sections gets slashed and burned every single time is the unboxing and all the parts that are in the box.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because I can put that up there an hour later, right? Like I hit publish at 1:00 and I can come back at 1:15 and put those photos in. I can update the post. I can add a section later on how music works because, like take a Garmin device. Music works the same on every Garmin device for the last 7 years. So I might, for completeness, show how it works later on. I've tested it, etc. But it's not like high priority to show how tap pay works and music works, since that's the exact same as it's been for the last 7 years. But I might come back later on and add that so people searching for that from a new product standpoint can see how it works.
Sure, yeah. And then that gets us to the actual day of publishing our videos or raised posts out there. And those, again, can be sometimes positive reviews, sometimes negative reviews. And that may actually get into maybe getting blacklisted by companies out there.
So what happened was... Yeah,
so I'm going to let you start with this one because yeah,
so getting blacklisted by companies is kind of funny, right? In the sports, in the reviewer world for everything, doesn't matter what sports product or not, etc. Generally speaking, you get blacklisted by companies if one, you violate an embargo, which we take great care to not violate an embargo. It's and especially on weeks like this week and the last 2 weeks where you guys in the US have done your whole daylight saving spring bouncy bunny thing, right? But here in Europe, we haven't done that yet. We have a 3-week gap. So I have to double check every single embargo and be like, did this come from a European company or a US company? And then which time zone are they giving it me on? And then recalculate it from there. And even Wahoo, again, I'm not throwing Wahoo under the bus, but I'm giving an example of how this can go wrong. They had sent out the embargo, but did the wrong conversion on the European side. And so it wasn't a big deal because it actually brought my embargo forward an hour. But if it had been a European company doing the opposite, then you could actually end up with a scenario where you go too early, etc. So that's option one for getting blacklisted. Not really a concern for either of us. Option two would be if you were to basically say something substantially bad about the product that they get upset about. And keeping in mind, we say things that are bad about products like every review. And we have throttled some products, right? Some big name products and absolutely thrown on the bus. I think of something like the Varia Radar RCT 715, right? RCT? Yeah, 715. That I literally start off the review saying, do not buy this product. And then I went into reasons why over the next 15 minutes. Companies obviously don't necessarily appreciate that, but what I've found is that the companies that are well-run companies that have good people behind the scenes and are well-run, they generally know when they're releasing crap products. They do. They genuinely do. They know when there's shortcomings there. And whether or not they can stop that marketing machine or not is a whole different ballgame. But I have found that when I release a product, and if I'm crapping on a product, I feel like it's being fairly crapped on. Meaning I feel like this product is horrific in some way, shape, or form. And that's why I'm trying to prevent people from buying it. But I feel like those companies do tend to understand that. They tend to understand why I'm upset about those things that I say is bad. I rarely get, from the good companies anyways, feedback back that says, Ray, you're wrong for all these reasons. We hate you. You're blah, 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 blah. It doesn't happen from good companies. It happens from companies that aren't so awesome, right? And so we've had a few of those over the time, sometimes smaller companies, but not usually. I would argue I've outlasted all those companies, so I'm probably doing something right. I'd say the other thing is that even when I've been banned or blacklisted, companies come back around again. So probably a relatively public example is this past September, whatever it was, August, September, October, whatever the case was, Koros basically blacklisted me from their products for no obvious apparent reason. And I'm not going to go into this
accidentally too.
That's the real kickers. We come to find out it was an accident. It was a really bad game of telephone that occurred internal to Koros after watching some internet chat boards in China that resulted in this bizarre game of telephone where their CEO said, no, we're going to ban this person, right? And they didn't send me the watch. And they basically said, they literally called me up and said, we are ceasing all forward-looking communications with you. And I was like, wait, what? And if you're interested in this, I did an entire behind-the-scenes video on this for DCR supporters or YouTube member supporters on my channel anyways. You can watch the whole video. I spent like an hour through this entire process. Long and the short of it is they eventually flew here. They flew 3 people. They're 2 CEOs. One of them got stuck in customs, but he went on Zoom, and one of them came here, another person, and had a big chat. And they basically said, oops, we're really sorry. We screwed this up. There are other cases where I've been, temporarily put in a holding pen of sorts. And because they were upset about different things. Another company that I'll rename nameless at the moment is upset about stuff still from last fall because they were upset that I called out some of the features being not good, right? And I think you find some companies are they're more sensitive to that than others, I guess you could say. But I don't worry about it. And the thing is, I'm lucky in that I have a big enough audience that, like Des kind of jokingly posted, I can post whenever and it'll work out. But I'll buy the product. I'm still going to buy the product, right? I'm still going to go out and buy those most popular products. I'm still going to test it, and I'm still going to say what I'm going to say. So you as a company have the opportunity to, I don't want to use the word work with me in the wrong way, but you have the opportunity to get my feedback ahead of time and maybe correct those issues or help me understand why things are the way they are. You may not like the end result of that, but you still at least have the opportunity. Once you ban or blacklist me, that door closes, right? I'm not gonna listen to your ramblings when you have banned me, because I guess probably not talking to me anyways. And at that point, I'm just gonna do what I'm gonna do without your extra input. And sometimes the input is saying, hey, the feature that you're upset about not working, it's being fixed here, or it's coming down the road, or whatever the case is. That all goes away. And so it's generally very counterintuitive for companies to blacklist reviewers, especially fair reviewers, I would say. I think there's a case to be made for blacklisting reviewers that are unfair or clickbaity or et cetera. I don't think either of us fall into that camp. At least I hope I don't fall into that camp of being clickbaity on bad reviews. Like, you're not going to see me title a review that's, this is the worst review ever and be a positive review, right? That's not what I do. Even the bad reviews, I don't title the worst thing ever for the most part. I think, you just, if you write normal stuff and you shoot normal stuff and you talk about the problems that are real world problems and why they're real, then I think most consumers and most companies tend to understand. If you're clickbaity and all that stuff, then it tends to fall apart.
Yeah, I think it's super important as a reviewer to have a good dialogue with these companies, but it's definitely a reciprocal relationship there too, where, if you are giving them feedback that is fair and not, dramatized at all, then again, that communication should happen back and forth. So unfortunately, there's a few companies at this point that at some point or another, I've given my feedback to them, or they've seen my final review and I haven't heard from them since, unfortunately. There's going to be companies out there that they don't like what you're saying. I mean, there's one review that I did. I'll leave the name of the company unsaid, but
that takes all the fun out of it.
But to toot my own horn, it's like I have, one of the most watched videos on YouTube about this product, and I can't get an email back from them about it. But I wasn't necessarily positive about the product out there. But yeah, again, having that dialogue is super, super important for the long term. So yeah.
So what percentage of your reviews, so setting aside blacklisted stuff and bad products, what percentage of your reviews don't see the light of day simply due to time? Like, you just don't have the hours to finish it?
It goes to the style of review, right? Like, in terms of like what kind of product it's going to be and whatnot too. So I would say that the percentage of reviews, are you talking about like just videos in general, or like just video concepts too?
Video, I think anything that you do, whether it be a review or a video concept that you've shot some chunk of, that never makes it not even to the finish line, but never makes it onto the bus or onto the train to get going.
Okay. So I was literally looking at my folder I literally have a folder on my computer called On Hold. That's like,
See, I don't have that, so I don't even know how bad the list is, right?
okay, and there were easily like 80 folders in there probably. So I would say in percentage, I think I'm over half. I'm probably over 50% of the video concepts or the reviews that I have started that just I have never gotten across the finish line due to many reasons. It's like one can be with stuff like the Nix sensor. It's like, I have tons of footage of something like that, and I don't know if that's going to ever see the light of day. But then there's other videos, I know you have these as well, but that maybe you just can't like put together a good story behind it. So Ray and I did a hike in the Canary Islands last year where I was testing the Sunto race and the Sunto vertical back to back. And, both of us had been filming throughout this entire hike. And, I thought I had everything put together that I needed, got home. I spent hours and hours and hours on this edit, and I just couldn't put together a cohesive story that I was happy with. And that video, I've got like 100 gigs of footage there, and it's never going to see the light of day. But so that's on my end of things. There's a lot. So how about you?
Yeah, I'd say it's 90% plus. Like
90% plus. Wow.
Yeah, easily. Like it's bad. I think the challenge is I'm getting better on it than I probably was like 2 years ago.
Okay.
And that I'm just not starting things that I know just don't have a viable path to completion. And I'm not spending that time there, but I shoot an enormous amount of stuff that never sees the light of the day. And I'm getting better at being focused. Like a really good example of that is this hover drone review, right? And that it's gone on too long. I got it back in December, and I've been chugging along doing stuff. It was well after it had been announced, so it doesn't really a rush item for me, but there's a lot of interest in it. So I wanted to get it done, and I think it's an incredibly cool product. And today I'm editing it, and I get a news release from Komoot about these new features that Komoot's announced that are legitimately very cool features, right? And I think past me would have paused my review that I'm working on. And I was trying to get out by the end of today, but I went and froze my ass off in the lake instead. But past me would have said, I'm going to stop, write the Komoot thing, get that out the door, and then go back to the hover thing. And before I know it, I'd be at the end of the day and I wouldn't have got anything done, right? Now I'm at a point where this hover review will go out tomorrow, pretty confidently by lunchtime or so at the latest, hopefully, using YouTube math.
1 p.m.
And 4 p.m. To be fair, the kids are on like Easter holiday now, so that dorks up the whole kid defensive zone system there. But in any case, that's where I think in the past I would have stopped, done the Komoot thing, and then got me all distracted, and then I would end up with basically almost nothing, right, at the end of the day. Versus now, I'm like, the Komoot thing is great. I will get to that if I can at the end of tomorrow. But I'd also, and this is a really good example of where I have planned out my week, where I am talking about one of those things that I'm still waiting 2 years later to finish, is my Tour de Mont Blanc hike video, which is something that I did a year and a half ago in August of 2022. And it's effectively a timeless video. It's, me on this epic, 10-day journey hiking alone. And I've edited, I would say 85% of that video, maybe 90% of that video. I basically edited everything except for the last day, essentially. But I still need to add music and really tighten up the edit quite a bit. And it's going to be a long video. It's going to be, my guess is 50 minutes, 60 minutes. And I just don't care, right? I'm at the point where, homie, don't care. I'm just going with it. But I had planned, hoped and dreamed, like almost every week, to finish this by Friday before I called it done for the day. And again, the Komoot thing is where do I delay my hopes and dreams for the week? And because I'm hiking all next week, then I have to have that stuff set out. And also I had hoped to get the thing that's being announced next week. I need to shoot that as well before the end of Friday, before I get a plane and go somewhere. So it's always this balance and trying to figure out what just stays in the on hold bucket, right? And my on hold bucket is literally, it's over there. It's like a 16 terabyte drive right now that I just keep moving stuff off my laptop onto this drive in hopes that eventually I'll finish it. And sometimes you do, and sometimes it's that product is no longer relevant. It's now, one generation behind.
That's eventually what happens. I look at some of these holding folders that I have. I'm like, wow, that was 3 years ago. I collected a lot of footage for that, and it's never ever going to see the light of day. But it's kind of funny. You're talking about your video is 85% done, but I would say that YouTube videos, they're kind of like moving, where where you think you're like, okay, I'm 80% done with moving. Well, that last 20% is like half the battle. And it's just like getting it over that finish line, that can be so challenging.
It can be. I think especially in these sort of like the vlog style videos can be really tough because there tends to be so many video sources. So for this, the Tour de Mont Blanc video, it's got roughly 1,000 pieces of video shot over 10 days. So you're talking drones, multiple action cameras, phone footage, God, it was other cameras I had at the time, all consolidated. So like just the process to consolidate and organize that footage was days alone to pull it together and then start to figure out how you take what could be like 2 to 3 hours of footage per day and bring that down into the most consolidated little 15 minutes. Like those, for me, those are the toughest things to edit. But honestly, they're some of the ones I enjoy the most. And so one of the reasons I'm really trying to get this done by Friday is I'm going to go shoot another one of these videos next week. And I want a bit of feedback. And I know that like what I did on the Tour de Mont Blanc hike from a shooting standpoint, there's a lot of times where I'm like, I needed a lot more general B-roll, right? Like I had a lot of talking to the camera and talking about things and stuff like that versus a lot of those hiking type videos. It's you put the camera out there, you walk past it and all that kind of stuff, right? And I don't got a lot of that put the camera out there and walk past it type of stuff. So I'm having to like nuance this a lot more. And so I kind of want some of the feedback back on this video from people before I start on the trail to be like, aha, this is what people do or don't want in a video from me. Again, whether or not I hit that timeline, I guess people will find out by the time they watch this video probably, but we'll see.
So something I feel that's helped over the years is, so we've definitely gone on a lot of adventures together in the past, and this certainly helps a lot in the B-roll, just different types of clips that you can gather, establishing the story, establishing like, here's, the mountain backdrop, here's me hiking or something like that. Because in terms of the self-filming, like the self-vlogs and stuff like that, you can probably understand that that's a lot of work to like go walk up to something, place your tripod and camera there, and then like run back and then like run past it. It's just a whole bunch of work. So we've definitely gone a lot of trips together, and that's where I think I did like a Phoenix 6 versus Chorus Vertex 2 video or something like that. We were both in, it was
Chamonix,
in
I think. Yeah.
Chamonix, yeah. And that was just super helpful to have both of us filming at the exact same time. Both of us just were able to grab the footage. I think we kind of instinctively know like what each other need for a particular concept, because we have the idea of when we go out on these journeys, like what kind of video that we're going to film at that time. So we're able to help each other out in those sort of scenarios.
Definitely. That's another example, though, of video I never finished. I have the video on the cutting room floor. It never made it even like into the edit suite. It is just footage in a folder somewhere. And I would say like almost all the adventures we have together, one of us is shooting a video. I think we've gotten better, though, over the years in that we generally don't try to both shoot a video for that given day. Almost like one of us decides that we're going to shoot it's going to be their video, right? It's going to be Dez's video or it's going to be Ray's video. And the other person is a supporting actor. But this isn't like a debate or anything. It's merely a like, you have a plan for today? Yeah, I'm going to do this. Cool. And the other person just goes into the automatic mode of, I'm going to be the cameraman for all the random B-roll shots, right? And it's the knowing of like, Des and I know if we're going around some super scenic bend, it's like, hey, hold on a second, dude. Let me just go up ahead for a couple seconds, right? And I'll go up 20 seconds ahead and I'll get Des coming around the corner, or I'll pause and I'll just be like, hey, just keep on walking past me. And I'll get a shot of him walking off into the sunset. And it's just, it's so easy for two people like us to just do this because it comes completely natural. We don't even have to have a conversation. It's just automatically happens.
This, so I don't know. I have a little like reminiscent tear in my eye at this point, but this kind of brings us, this brings us back to the first time we met. So this was like, whatever, 7 years ago or something like that. So this was, I think we've shared this story before in the past, but
Yeah.
I don't know. In terms of like,
awesome.
how we actually met, other than Tinder, it wasn't Tinder, but
Tinder for sports geeks.
for sports tech, exactly. But we ended up meeting at, it was a bike trade show, and I can't remember exactly.
Interbike. Yeah.
It was Interbike. Or was it the last?
But it wasn't. It was
it
last
the last
Interbike.
one?
It was in Reno.
It
Yeah.
was the last Interbike. Yeah. So it was pretty funny. So Ray arrived at my hotel, and you'll see this pop up on Ray's Instagram, by the way. Recurrence of this joke, but he shows up at my hotel, and we're gonna go shoot a drone video that day. So basically, he shows up, he comes, and he has this paper bag, like this paper
Safeway paper bag.
Safeway grocery paper bag. I'm like, oh, hey, so what's in the paper bag? Your lunch or something like that? It was his drones. Like he was carrying
two
around
unreleased brand new DJI drones set to come out in a few weeks, just
like
in a paper bag.
In a paper bag. So that's his this spy world of Ray right there, is that he doesn't have these fancy cases for any of these products or anything like that. Like he'll carry them around he'll have them like in a Subway sandwich bag or a
Totally.
Yeah, totally.
I send back. In fact, that's actually a funny tidbit. At trade shows like the CES of the world, I would generally return back a pile of watches to Garmin in a Subway sandwich bag. I know, I'll just call her out. Stephanie has received a Subway sandwich bag full of like $10,000 worth of watches, and she's been like, what on earth is this? And I'm like, it's your watches back.
and did you have a meatball sub for lunch?
Yeah, exactly. But it's the most practical. I'm a very practical. Despite not being born in the Netherlands, I'm a very practical person. I'm like, if I'm flying across the ocean, I'm not going to ship this stuff across the ocean. I'm just going to take it with me in my bag. I got a Subway bag. Well, just return it that way and call it done, right? Like easy peasy.
It's these trips that we do together, they're just incredibly easy in terms of being able to help each other out with the kinds of content that we're doing. And a lot of times they sort of center around like maybe a product release at the time too. Yep. So one that kind of comes to mind is the Samsung Galaxy Watch 6 last year. We basically did some testing with that. We, went around the Italian Dolomites and whatnot. It was super, super pretty. One interesting fact about this though is that, just like anything on Instagram or Facebook that you see out there, it's like, that's certainly a slice of life in terms of like, okay, we're out on these like amazing adventures, right? It's like we're going and seeing like all this amazing countryside, riding all these amazing routes, stuff like that. But there's sometimes where we're kind of like locked up in a hotel room too, like, doing
a lot of times.
Yeah.
So many times. I think, the Italian Alps the Cordova one is a great example of that. Dolomites, right? We're there in the Dolomites with lucking into a last second hotel room with a balcony with the most amazing view that you can have in the Dolomites. And we're on our computers for the entire day. We literally were like this, again, YouTube timelines, we're like, we'll be out of here by 10:30, 11. Yeah, we're still sitting there like at 8 p.m. at night. It's turning to darkness. We have not moved. We have sat there the entire day. I don't even know if we ate that day. Like we just got stuff done, right? And that's the reality of we had to hit an embargo, and that's the time frame to hit it, right? And and that's happened countless times when I'm traveling, where it's like I'm in this amazing place, but I just have to get this review done because I have to get it done for this time frame, because that's ultimately what drives. Like I guess we've talked a lot about embargoes and time frames, and I don't think we ever talk about why it's important to us though, from a product reviewer standpoint. And that there is, as the saying says, like the early bird gets the worm, and there is a definite difference between being there at embargo announcement when the product is announced and you have your video or your post ready to go. That then is posted around the internet, right? People will post that to Reddit, they'll post it to these forums you've never heard of, to Facebook, to the friends, etc. Especially within that first 15 to 30 minutes. If you show up like 8 hours later, 10 hours later, you're basically arriving with like a dead fish, right? Like, and again, there are exceptions where you can get away with things that, for very, very big products and all these sort of stuff. But like, even then, that's tough. Like, you really have to be there at day zero. and again, there's exceptions to that, but it's important for us to hit those timelines if we do have access to the product. And in cases where we've been blacklisted or banned, like we'll get there when we get there, like I said earlier on, and I'll just do a really damn good review of that product for better or worse, and hope it works out.
Yeah, and that's really the thing, is that ultimately both of us are just trying to put out the best content that we can. And that's why some of our content is going to be late at certain points. And it's kind of funny, like some people have actually asked us, like, why are we actually friends? Because we are competition in that sense. It's like, both of us are sports tech reviewers / journalists sort of thing. And, we are competing for that same audience. At the same time, though, we do have our different takes on these products as well. And we do test them in, different sort of scenarios. Like, Ray does open water swimming. I don't care to do that. I do a lot of weight training and high intensity interval training. Ray definitely
don't care to do that. No.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we definitely have different takes on the products that we review, and we'll definitely have different types of information that we put out there. So as much as we are competition, I kind of view it as when, let's say, you and your best friend are like running in a race or something like that, where, it's like both, I think if you're good friends, like you both want to have your best day out there. But, if your friend wins, good for that person right there. If you win, good for you too. It's like, so that's how I view our relationship, at least, is that, I know that we are competing for views in a sense, but at the end of the day, it's like, both of us want each other, I think, just to do a good job and put out good content,
Yeah, totally. And I think also having sometimes a validation on products is useful. Like if a company has told us that we both have the units, right, and we're free to talk back and forth, then it's useful to be able to validate issues we've been having, or validate successes and be like, hey, are you seeing this? And he'll be like, no, I don't. Mine's working perfectly fine, right? And then I can be like, okay, so maybe it's just my unit. Versus if both of us are seeing the same thing, then it's like, oh, okay, we got to double back to the company because we're both seeing this. I think a great example of that just this week was actually that same Wahoo thing that I keep talking about, where Shane and I were texting back and forth because you weren't up yet, because it was still like 4 a.m. your time. And I was having a problem on one part of it. He was having a problem on a different part of it. And between the two of us, we solved our problems, right? Like it was one of those, I solved the GoPro part for him and he solved the bike light part for me. And we got to the finish line together. And, again, Wahoo wasn't up yet. It was too early in the morning. So that allowed us both to like, oh, this is how this is supposed to work. Got it, good to go now. And it wasn't a technical thing, right? That's where if I had put out a video and been like, this thing just doesn't work, like versus it was a me problem of, oh, that's where that little piece is. Got it now. Okay, now I get it. That can be super useful.
Yep, totally. Yeah. So, gosh, I think we have made it to the end of the list. Do you have anything else that you can even think of that you want to bring up? This is your opportunity. Put in any.
No, I mean, my SD card has an hour and 6 minutes left. I know we've got an hour, 47 minutes and 14 seconds right now, but why not? Let's just keep on going. No, I think we've covered everything that we had on our very long shared notes list right here. I think this is like, it's what people don't know. We actually shot a first version of this episode, I think 2 weeks ago, and we got to the end of it and Des started editing it. And I think we had the realization it just wasn't, we didn't stick the landing, right? And I think it was one of those cases where, we could have put it out there, but it just didn't flow. And I'm hoping this flows better, or at least has way more information in, even if
it does have way more information. Yeah.
Way more information about how we did stuff. I think the first one was just a little bit kind of whatever, but this is, I think we try to get across like the reality of a sports tech reviewer. I think maybe the kind of my final thought here is that both of us understand, as Des said at the very beginning, we're very, very lucky to do this as a job, right? Like, despite me being out there in 46-degree Fahrenheit water today, open water swimming, 8 degrees for you, everyone else in the world. It's still kind of fun, right? Like it's still one of those things where even the most miserable days are still better than most days anywhere else. And so it's a lot of fun to be able to do this. We're extremely lucky and privileged to do this, but we still have days that are good and bad. And we wanted to kind of share with you that entire process as to what it actually takes to get a review out. And so hopefully this illuminates some of those corners for you, for things that maybe are left unsaid somewhere else.
Yeah, no, we definitely appreciate the positions that we have. And again, like how fortunate we are to have this as a job. There's definitely the good days and the bad days, but we definitely appreciate you all for supporting us over the years too. And appreciate your continued support going forward with both our YouTube channels, Ray's website, and of course, this podcast.
Speaking of which, you can find this podcast in a whole bunch of different places on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, as well as on YouTube Music or YouTube itself. And if you do watch the YouTube one, it's cool because you can go back and forth between the video version on YouTube or the audio version on YouTube Music. As well, you can find the podcast at dcrainmaker.com/podcast for just simply the podcast feed itself. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.
See ya.